Hi, welcome to A Creator's Process, an in-depth look at the process and making of every new short film I release. Today, we take a look at my latest short film, Therapy, a story about a guy talking out his struggles to someone he trusts. There's a lot to discuss with this short, so let's dive right into it. All right, we are here, you guys. The very first episode of A Creator's Process. I cannot believe that this is actually a thing that's happening. I've always loved podcasts and commentaries. I watch movies with the director's commentary all the time. If you don't do that, I really recommend you do, especially if you're interested in filmmaking and what goes on behind a movie. You can learn so much about a movie just by listening to the commentary as you watch it. It's fantastic. But like I said, I've always loved watching movies with commentaries and just listening to commentaries on movies, and I figured why not do my own? First off, if you don't know who I am, my name is Jake Hageman, and I am a filmmaker and the man behind Therapy, which is a short film I've worked on for the last 5 months now. This is my 6th short film I've put online for my YouTube channel. They range back over the last 4 years or so. Some of them I am very proud of and very happy to share with people. And others I have to give a word of warning to because they're not the best. They're less than average, let's just say that. But with each short film, I've grown and gotten better. In fact, you can check out my analyzation of my last 5 short films on my YouTube channel. It was a lot of fun diving into some short films that I haven't watched in a while. So you can check that out on my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Jake Hageman. That's not why we're here, though. Today we're going to be talking about therapy. So I know what you're probably thinking to yourself. What is this? Why is a guy who makes movies doing some weird spoken word thing? And I'll admit, it's a little weird for me, too. But I realized as I made more short films and shared them with people that a lot of people don't really understand everything that goes into making a short film. A lot of people think Hollywood just spits out movies, and they do, but at the same time, they don't really, if that makes sense. There are years of planning and work behind every movie you watch, whether it's some small indie movie or a huge blockbuster like The Avengers, and I thought this would be a really cool way to share with people my process in making a short film, being a super small-time filmmaker and just doing short films with people that I know. I offer a completely different perspective than somebody who does these huge blockbusters. So I thought I'd keep this kind of down to earth and just sharing what it's like practically if you want to do a short film kind of like I do. This is going to be for 2 types of people. The first is those who are just interested in what it's like to make a short film. And to those people, I hope you enjoy it. It's a long process and it's a long journey, much like actually making a short film. But I think if you stick around and listen, you'll find some interesting things here, and hopefully you'll watch movies a little bit differently in the future. The other is those who also make movies and want to gain something from it, maybe learn a new technique or get an idea for something to try the next time they're on a set. I think every filmmaker has something unique about their style that they can offer to other people, and every filmmaker has something that they can learn from other people. So if you're a filmmaker listening to this, hopefully you'll get something out of this, and maybe in turn I'll learn something from you. We're going to cover 8 different phases that I went through when making Therapy, and you'll be able to tell whenever it moves on to a different topic. I don't want to spend any longer on the intro, so let's just dive right into it. A quick word of warning, by the way, this commentary will be diving into lots of spoilers for my short film Therapy and basically breaking down everything that there is to this short film. So if you haven't watched it yet, check it out on my YouTube channel, then come back here and keep listening. So the first thing I'm discussing is brainstorming. And brainstorming is an interesting step because it's the first step of any project, but it also can be the one that puts off a lot of people. Some people just get so frustrated that they can't come up with an idea that they just give up and don't do anything with that feeling they have to do something. While brainstorming, you're literally just writing anything that comes to your mind that could possibly be the start of something. If something literally just grazes your mind, you jot it down, you get it on that paper, because 5 minutes later, your mind could be on something else, and that's a missed opportunity that you could use, maybe not at that exact moment, but maybe you could use in the future. I cannot tell you the number of times I had an idea for something and I was like, oh, I'll write it down when I get to wherever I'm going, or I'll write it down in a couple minutes. And then I get there and I had completely forgotten the idea. And it happens to me all the time. And it's so easy just to get frustrated when these things happen, when you lose an idea, but you just have to accept it. You're going to forget ideas, and that's okay. It happens to everyone. Just don't be discouraged when it happens. Keep that brain working, and if you get that idea back, that's awesome. And if you don't, that's okay too. Just move on to the next one and keep thinking, because you're going to think of something, and it's an idea you can use. Any idea is an idea you can use. You might not have the means to pull off a certain idea at the moment, but maybe in the future, like I said, you could use it. My specific process for this short film went in a completely different direction than I would have planned. For a long time, I was actually working crazy hard on a short film called The Man on the Street, and even got all the way through filming it before I hit some major complications that ultimately led to me shutting down production for the foreseeable future. It's a long story, and I'll be happy to explain it if you want to hit me up on social media or anything like that. But among brainstorming for that, I came up with this idea for therapy and jotted it down. I came up with this idea back in November, and I began to develop it and even started writing the script just a little bit. My brain ultimately took me in the direction of The Man on the Street, which fell flat, and thankfully I had this idea to fall back on. I knew that I always wanted to make a very monologue-esque short film, something that felt realistic. I wanted it to feel authentic, with one or two people talking at most, and possibly being a long take or just one take. I never really had the right idea to do something unique that I'd never seen before, and something that style of filmmaking would make sense for, because everything that you do within filmmaking needs to have a purpose. Whether it's doing a black and white short film, there needs to be a reason why that's black and white, if that makes sense. I've said this to a lot of people. I've said this a lot to people, but I try to put some part of myself or my life into every short film I do, so I feel personally invested and connected to the project, and I thought, you know what, screw it. I'm going to put a lot of myself into this monologue-style short that I've been wanting to do. And I think what we managed to pull off was really personal. I based almost everything off of real things and real feelings that I've experienced in my life. I often felt alone and not able to trust people. I still get anxious around people. I've had people be nice to me after treating me terribly and pretending that nothing ever happened. I've thrown things in anger. I've talked about my problems into a mirror. All that are things that the main character feels and experiences throughout this short film. So throughout this process, I personally felt such a strong connection to it like I had never felt before. And a lot of people who have read this script have been able to feel that personal touch when I explain my connection to it. It's so reassuring that it's such a reassuring feeling when people tell you that the one thing you set out to do is being done well. I felt on a bit of a time crunch with this short because I wanted to make something before I moved for the summer and wanted to get it out in April for sure, because there was a short film competition at my college. However, being able to develop the story with my own experiences has made the whole brainstorming and developing process so much easier. So yeah, that's kind of the story of how therapy came about. And as I said earlier, brainstorming is just jotting down what pops up in your head. There's really nothing you can plan or predict brainstorming-wise and coming up with ideas. It just kind of happens. And everyone's brainstorming experience is different. Some people see something and it triggers a whole web of possibilities, or other people remember something or a memory from years ago and spin it off of that. Other people start with a set topic or thing and brainstorm all the different directions that thing can go. It's different for every person and every project. And like I said, don't be discouraged when mind-blowing ideas don't come to mind right away. Just keep thinking, keep going, and jot down anything that could possibly be an idea, because eventually that idea is going to hit and it's going to be awesome, I promise. The next topic we're going to talk about is writing, which was definitely one of the most difficult parts of this specific short film. With writing your script, you're writing everything the audience sees or hears throughout the course of the film. Literally everything from dialogue to setting and scenery to important sound effects and visual cues that support the story you're telling. It's a painstaking process. And by their nature, short films aren't nearly as bad as regular films because, rather than writing the script to a 2-hour full-length movie, you're only writing anywhere from 3 minutes to 10 minute stories. So it helps a ton time-wise. Writing is also when you spend the bulk of your time really developing the story and the characters. It's where your idea transcends being just a concept and it turns into something more, which is super cool, but also pretty scary at the same time. It's easy to come up with an idea like, what if a surfer dude meets an alien? But then the hard part comes with actually taking that idea and crafting something that audiences would think is interesting. With therapy, it was especially harder to develop because I only used one actor and one setting, and that was it. I didn't have much to help support the story I was telling. I had to make sure that the character's personality, his motives, his backstory, his emotions, they all come through the screen and that you're able to see all those things through what I filmed. I want to talk about Jason for a little bit, who's the main character of Therapy, because he is so rich, he's so complex, and by far the most personal character I've ever written. I feel like I have this huge connection to him because we are so alike in so many different ways. I knew when I started writing it that I wanted to craft this character in a way that was loosely based off of my own experiences, but by the time I got done writing, there ended up being so much of myself in him. It was weird when it got to filming time because it honestly felt like I was filming a version of myself, which is a segue into where the big reveal comes in. As I said earlier, the idea for this short started just in the form of a monologue. I just wanted to be able to tell a story through dialogue and maybe tinker around a little bit on a technical level. It wasn't until pretty late in the writing process that I came up with the idea for the twist, where it's revealed that Jackson has been talking to a mirror this whole time, further enforcing the idea of his loneliness and his lack of trust, which is built up and talked about throughout the film before it. This is a thing that I myself have done as well. I would just talk into a mirror because I felt like nobody else was really there to listen to me, but I always knew that the man in the mirror would. And that little reveal just added so much to Jackson's character and felt so unsettling, but also felt satisfying in a way, Like, yes, he doesn't have anyone he can trust, but he is at peace knowing that the man in the mirror is listening and won't push him away. It's the type of mixed emotions that I love to leave the audience, where they come out of it feeling the satisfaction that Jackson does, having gotten all these things off of his chest, but also left with this thought of what it's like to be in his shoes and feeling the things he's feeling. And I think that's such an important thing to think about, what it's like to be in somebody's shoes who doesn't have anybody to lean on. Because most of us, we all have friends or people that we can lean on and talk to when we have problems, but at a time in my life, there was nobody for me. I was struggling with friends. I didn't have anybody that I could really talk to except for myself because I knew for a fact that I wasn't going anywhere and I would always listen to myself. And I wanted Jackson to feel the same way. And I think through this short film, so many people are going to see those types of people in a different perspective. Rather than just being antisocial introverts, they see them as complicated people who carry all this baggage with them and don't have anybody they can trust. And I think that's such an important thing in a society that is all about yourself and just what other people think about you and just building up your name and your credibility. I want to switch the tables and make people think about other people for a change. I'm really fortunate that this idea came when it did because at the time I was really struggling to find a way to close the short film in an effective manner, and that twist was just everything the story needed. Writing this twist has helped me think more creatively and write more creatively, but in a way that is also grounded to reality and the problems that we face as humans, and that's exactly what the art of filmmaking is all about. I'm actually currently reading a book on writing better screenplays, so hopefully the things I produce in the future will be higher quality, but I am learning so much from it. I'm learning how to convey emotion and story through writing, which I usually did just through winging it and doing what I thought was best. If I had that book while I was writing therapy, I think it could have been even better, but we've got what we've got, and I don't think it's that bad. So if you want to check out this book, it's called Screenplay Writing the Picture by Robin U. Russin and William Missouri Downs. I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to write their own scripts. I would also recommend the book Story by Robert McKee if you're interested in the breakdown of emotions, themes, characters, and much more within a story. It's not as much a book for people who want to be writers or are writers and want to write better, but it can be just for anybody who loves stories, whether it be through film, through music, through television, whatever it may be. And it's just a breakdown of characters and emotions and themes, and it's really for anybody who wants to dive deeper into that and the deeper meanings within a story that you may not see. It will really help change the way that you take in stories in whatever medium it is. It's a really great book. I'd highly recommend either of these two books. They are fantastic and really great reads for anybody who loves story and wants to write better. All right, so casting is the next subject that we're going to touch on. This is a pretty quick topic, but I do want to tackle it before we move on to anything else. One thing that I've always found over my time of making short films is that you can't be afraid to use your resources. Sometimes that's looking in your closet for anything that can function as something else for the sake of your production, which I've done a lot. But mainly, it's not being afraid to use the people that you know. If you have siblings or you have friends, have them act in your short films. If you need somebody to hold up a light for you, use them for that. Even if you can't pay them, it's still a fun experience for both of you, and I've found that over my time of doing short films. With this short film, it was the first one that I made since I started college, so I wanted to make something that would get friends that I made here in college involved in my short films. And that is where my good friend Decameron, or DK, comes in. DK is a theater major at Tyler Junior College, where I go to school, and y'all, this man is freaking talented. He has been in one major production here at TJC and has also been involved in other productions as well. When I was writing this short film, I was trying to think of people that could not only act well, but that I knew would bring something completely different to the table. Someone who would take what I had written and do it in a completely different way than I would have expected. And before I even finished writing it, I knew that DK was who I wanted to bring this to life. And man, did he deliver. There were so many takes while we were shooting that left me just so emotionally drained just witnessing his performance. We'll get into that more with the section on shooting, but that's really it for this section. I know it was short, but I did want to bring that up before we moved on. And DK, if you're listening, thank you so much for working hard to make this great and for delivering the goods with this one, because you are absolutely amazing. So, without further ado, let's keep going. The next thing I did in this process was determine the cinematography. I mentioned before that I wanted this to feel like a long take, and I've wanted to be able to pull that off for a good while now. The inspiration for that came when I first watched the film Birdman. I was absolutely blown away that they were able to make a full 2-hour movie flow so seamlessly and make it look like the whole thing was one big long take. It added to the story so much, and I was just so inspired by that I wanted to do something like that. The problem was choosing a story that would go well with that. I'm a firm believer that everything in a film has a purpose for being there, and that it must always support the story you're telling. If there's no reason for it to be in your film, then it shouldn't be there. I finally found that the story I was telling with therapy really supported the idea of a one-shot short film. We could feel the feelings that Jackson feels without being disconnected with the use of cuts or other transitions. It would just flow naturally. It would feel like a therapy session, and I could just see it all in my head coming together. The other problem arose with, what exactly am I going to do with that? How is the camera going to move? How can I support the story through the way that I move the camera? I started out thinking I wanted it smooth, very smooth camera movements, but I found two things along the way. First off, I didn't have the means to make that work the way that I wanted to, and B, it just didn't support the story in the long run. This is about a broken man, and if we are the embodiment of the mirror he is talking to as the audience, then we should feel the brokenness and the shakiness of his world. So I decided to go with the handheld camera, and it really helped a lot. But what about the actual movements? Which direction would it move? How would the camera move around relative to my actor and the mirror? I wasn't sure for a while, and I actually drew up about a dozen ideas for how the camera would move around. And then I decided to draw some inspiration from another movie that is regarded to be one of the best films of all time, and that film is The Godfather. First off, if you haven't seen The Godfather, what are you doing? This film is perfect. It's so beautiful. It is absolutely amazing. But if you haven't seen it, the very first shot of this film is a long take. It starts very close up on a man's face as he's talking to the main character, Don Vito Corleone. And it very, very slowly pulls away from his face as he continues to talk. I thought the idea of it was perfect. I was blown away the first time I watched it, and thinking about that when trying to come up with my cinematography, it just fit so well. How we start out close to Jackson, but as he continues to talk, we feel pulled away, we feel separated, as though, he was calling us out and things were awkward. And this has been my experience so many times. I would talk about something that I was struggling with people, and they would often try and separate themselves from that conversation and try to transition to a different one. It just fully supported the story, so I decided to stick with it. I also wanted a couple moments where we put the audience in the place of the mirror, so it seemed like he was talking to us. I deliberately did this in two places. The first is before it is revealed that he's talking to a mirror and he throws the chair towards the camera. It puts us, the audience, in his place in the mirror, and it makes it feel like he's throwing the chair at us, when in reality, as it's revealed later, he's throwing it at himself in the mirror because he wants anyone else to feel his brokenness, even if it is his own reflection. And I think putting the audience in that place in the story just helps so much with the audience feeling the emotional impact, and from what I've heard from people, it totally does. The second place I put this in is after the reveal, whenever he is thanking the person in the mirror for listening and for having his back. It makes us in the audience feel the satisfaction of being there for him, but in reality, it feeds into this false hope that Jackson has, that anyone cares about him and what he has to say. Instead, he has to resort to his own reflection, but he truly hopes that one day he can trust somebody else, and that's where the audience's place comes from. That's why he's talking into the mirror, so it looks like and it feels like he's talking into the mirror, but as an audience member, you're staring right at him, and he's staring right at you, and he's hoping that you can one day trust him, and that he can one day trust you. It's super deep stuff, I know, but it's real. These are things that I've legitimately felt before, and every time I was in that position, my only hope was that somebody else could feel that way like me, or at least understand and care about me enough to listen. And thankfully, that hope has now become a reality. But it's a reality that not a lot of people are aware of, and so I wanted the audience to learn that about people, how people have trust issues and want to be able to trust somebody, but they feel like they can't. And I feel like putting the audience in those shoes in the context of this story will really help just generate this idea of maybe I can try and be somebody for somebody else to lean on. I can be somebody that's there for other people instead of just focusing on myself. So that's the cinematography of Therapy. I'm super proud of it. I put so much thought and effort into planning this out. Let's go ahead and move on to the next section. Alright, the next thing we're going to talk about is planning, and obviously just the word planning has a lot to it. It's a pretty vague term just by itself, and it's honestly a pretty vague part of filmmaking because it's different for each production. You could have different props, different sets, different characters, stuff like that, and you're just going to need different things for each project that you do. And I don't want to ramble on for too much on something like planning, but it is such an important step, and I do want to discuss it for a little bit. Besides the obvious things to plan, like casting and the cinematography, which I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of other things that I had to figure out before I could start putting this idea, this short film, into action. I had to plan out shooting day, a location, what props were necessary, costumes, what gear I might need, other people that I needed to help me, lots of stuff, and we're going to touch on some of that now. So with planning shooting day, it kind of rolled into figuring out the location of my short film. I decided to film my short film in one of the theaters at my college. It's a smaller theater, pretty intimate actually, and I had to reserve it to make sure that nobody was going to be there, nobody was going to use it while we were shooting. And thankfully, everything worked out to where I was able to reserve the theater for 3 hours, which was longer than we needed, but helpful to have extra time just in case we needed it. And considering it was where we went to school, it was pretty easy just to meet at the school to shoot it because it was a place that we go all the time. And my actor actually lives on campus, which made it worlds easier. But the actual day we were shooting had to work with my actor to make sure that whatever day I wanted to film on, he would be able to shoot then as well. So we decided to film on a Saturday afternoon, and it worked out perfect. We just met at the school, we shot it. I also needed somebody to help operate the lights if needed, because I wanted to have a variety of shots to choose from, since this was all going to be one shot, and I had quite a few ideas of how I wanted everything to look visually. And thankfully, a friend of mine, Caitlin, who goes to school with us, was able to help, and even better, was able to make it on the day we planned to shoot, which was awesome. And we'll touch on her part in the short, more specifically in the shooting section. Planning props actually was a tad bit more difficult than I thought it would be. In my mind, it was pretty easy. I just needed a chair and a mirror. But finding the right chair and mirror were important, and it actually took some time to find the right ones, as stupid as that sounds. For the chair, I wanted it to be a little heavier, so when he throws it, it makes this loud impact, and you feel it. You feel the loudness and the impact of his anger and why he throws the chair. And I actually found this chair at home, which was like a standard black chair. It was padded and it's comfortable, but it was also a pretty heavy chair compared to other chairs, and so it ultimately served the purpose of the story really well. But I actually went through quite a few different chairs before settling on that one, and I kind of like spent some time just lightly throwing them just to see which one was the right one, because this had to be the right chair, and lucky enough, I just found it at home. For the mirror, it had to be black for sure, and it had to be big enough to where you could see his reflection clearly, and I didn't want it to be too small. I didn't want it to be just too skinny or anything like that. I bought a cheap mirror at Walmart that I thought would function, but on shooting day, found a mirror that was way better and bigger and was exactly what I wanted and needed. So I wasted $5 on a mirror that is still sitting in the back of my car. Planning costumes were pretty easy. It needed to look like he was at a therapy session, which is just casual clothes. So I let DK pick the costume for his character. I wanted him to have his own input on the character. I didn't want to like control every aspect of the short. I just was like, hey man, you pick the clothes that you think this character would wear. And so he showed up on shooting day with a Spider-Man shirt and jeans, and in my eyes, that was pretty much perfect, and that just kind of fit what he thought his character was. The last thing that I really needed to plan was the gear that I needed. And I have a good amount of gear at home, which was extremely helpful, and I just kind of gathered it all. I gathered my camera, my clip-on microphone, my phone to record audio, a monopod to help stabilize the shot a little bit, but still kind of give off that handheld vibe. And that was about it for gear. I did buy a simple like $20 stabilizer that's actually pretty good, but I wasn't fully used to it before shooting. I wasn't able to get it adjusted quite right for my camera. So I decided not to use it for this project, and that I should just be more comfortable with it before I decide to use it for a short film. And ultimately, the monopod that I had served its purpose, did exactly what I needed it to. And yeah, so that was that. And that's really it for planning. I know this isn't the most exciting part of the filmmaking process, and this isn't exactly a long section, because I don't want to take your time on something as simple as planning, but it is a step that takes time and is absolutely vital to the filmmaking process. Without planning, your project can easily come across as messy, rushed, and it most likely won't be taken seriously. So this short was pretty simplistic in the long run. It didn't take near as much planning, and helped a lot with stress. But it's still important whether you're juggling one actor at one scene or 10 actors at 10 different scenes. It's just as important either way. And so yeah, that's really planning. Let's move on to the next one. All right, we have finally made it to the biggest section in this whole thing, which is shooting. This is the big dog, where you take everything that you've created and developed and planned, and you put it into action. You make it a reality. It's honestly one of the most fun parts of filmmaking, but it is also one of the most stressful parts of filmmaking, because you encounter problems and situations that you didn't really think about, and it makes your shooting day a little more stressful, trying to adapt to everything to make sure everything goes the way you want to. So let's not waste any more time. Let's just jump into it. And I'm basically just going to tell you the story of how my shooting day went, because every project is going to be different, and you can learn so much on shooting day. And everybody's shooting day is going to be a little different. Everybody's going to learn different things along the way. So let's jump into it. So the day is Saturday, March 23rd. I got there about 30 minutes early to make sure that I had everything set up by the time DK and Caitlin, who did the lights, got there, so we could just hit the ground running as soon as we could. I didn't want to waste any time. As I mentioned in planning, I found the mirror that was way better than the one that I had bought, so that was super helpful. I propped it up against a stool downstage, and I then set up the chair where I wanted it, lined it up with the mirror, but a decent distance away, so I had room to tinker with the cinematography. I set up my microphone and my camera and made sure it all worked properly, which it did, and then I just waited for them to show up, and then we got to work. We ended up shooting for about 2 hours or so, trying different lighting ideas, which Caitlin was so incredibly helpful. She helped make sure the intensity was where I wanted it. She helped change colors when it was necessary. She just really helped make this short so much better than I ever could have come up with, which I just have to thank Caitlin so much for being willing to help make this short what it was. I also tried a couple different cinematography changes, but nothing made it significantly better than what I already had in mind, so I ended up just not changing anything from what I had in mind from the Godfather style shot. However, I actually found it pretty hard to move quietly and slowly on the stage while carrying a camera on a monopod and trying to keep it as stable as possible. I also had to be a director and make sure I was getting the performance that I needed out of DK, which he had no problem adapting to anything that I suggested. He absolutely crushed it, like I said earlier. You can see all the emotions he's portraying through his face. He brought everything to the performance that I wanted and more. Shooting wasn't necessarily hard. It just took some tries because, sometimes I would mess up, sometimes he would mess up a word, so we would have to start over. And it was very different than any other short film because this was all one shot. I couldn't just edit out a mistake if something that came before it was perfect. I just had to stop the recording, go back to where we started, and do it again. And honestly, it got pretty annoying sometimes. But I do want to bring up Birdman again, which is the movie that looks like it's all one take that I mentioned earlier. Doing my own little short film gave me so much more respect for what they were able to accomplish with that movie. It was already something I loved so much and I had such a deep appreciation for, but actually doing my own smaller version of that just made me realize how hard pulling that off really is. And even though they have dozens of scenes that have to flow in and out of each other, and mine was only one scene, it was really difficult to get everything right in one take. So I have to commend the cinematographers of Birdman because what they pulled off is so hard and so impressive. Anyways, after a good while of shooting, I felt satisfied with a couple of takes that we had gotten. I was submitting this into a short film contest at my school, so it had to be within 1 to 5 minutes, but the take I was most satisfied with was starting to approach 10 minutes, and I realized that a couple takes in, I realized that while we could do a longer take, and that was the one that I wanted to upload to YouTube and share with everybody, we had to do one that was kind of rushed so it would be within the parameters that I had for this contest. Anyways, I got what I needed and went home to get all the footage on my computer and to make sure everything I needed was there within those shots and within the audio. So I open it all up, I check the video, I check the audio, and start to roughly edit it together, but that's when I found that my video was much more shaky than I hoped, and the audio was way too fuzzy and rubbed up against my actor's shirt way too much. Ultimately, when I tried to make it sound natural, it just didn't work, which meant that reshoots had to happen, which is a filmmaker's favorite thing in the world, right? So we came in the following weekend on a Sunday afternoon, and I decided to make a couple key changes to hopefully make this short film better. First off, there were some changes that I had to make because they were out of my control, and that is mainly the lights and the set. My school was in the process of building sets and setting up the lighting for their final show of the semester, which is called Vroom, and it was actually a really good show, and I actually helped build some of the sets, but that's not what we're talking about. They were in the process of working on that, and I wasn't able to move the really big set pieces, and they were still in the process of setting up all the lighting, so we were extremely limited with the lighting that we had, but we ended up having white lights like coming down behind DK with kind of a red undertone that was downstage, but you can also kind of see that throughout the rest of the short film, and especially whenever the camera pans around and you see the mirror, you see a lot of red, which is really what I wanted. And even though it wasn't exactly what I had in mind, it ended up being way better than I ever could have hoped. And I got a ton of compliments of people saying how amazing the lighting was and how it just fit so well. And it's hard to take credit for that when it's something that you can't even control. The other main change I made is that I decided to shoot with my iPhone XR instead of my Canon EOS Rebel. When I was operating my camera the first day of shooting, the built-in mic kept getting disturbed a lot. I kept rubbing my hand against it, and it was really loud when I went in to kind of roughly edit it all together. And so I thought it would be easier to navigate, to move around, and to control focus with the iPhone, which was one thing that didn't come out as planned with the first day of shooting. But with the phone, you can tap the screen ever so slightly and control your focus, which was extremely helpful whenever you're pulling away gradually, but you need to be able to keep him in focus. The iPhone helped so much. It's amazing what technology can do these days, and even though my camera is super nice and I really wish I was able to use it, I'm still just not fully comfortable with it, and the phone was just so much easier to use. So I'm very thankful that we have technology in our pockets that are able to achieve so much and look so good whenever you're editing all together and the final product comes out. And
I was able to shoot in 4K on my phone, which was awesome. I'd never shot in 4K before, and to have that high of quality with my short film was just a dream come true. It was amazing and ultimately worked out way better than anything the camera could have achieved. An hour and a half or so later, we had finally gotten everything that we needed. I made sure the audio was perfect, and I moved it to a perfect spot right underneath his chin, clipped on to the neck of his shirt, which in the short is practically undetectable. You can't really see it in the short, even though I know exactly where it is. And it didn't interfere at all with his clothes and his movements or anything like that. So it was exactly what I needed, and DK, once again, just really brought it on shooting day. With the second day of shooting, I could really just feel the undertones of the emotion that DK was adding to the character of Jackson. I do want to share this real quick because it is one of my proudest moments as a director. So the shot you see in the full-length short that I put on YouTube is actually the very last take that we did that day. But the take right before it, I felt like something was missing, and maybe it was fatigue, maybe it was just something wasn't right, maybe he wasn't quite in the right mindset, I don't know, but it didn't feel 100% authentic to me. So I helped DK with what Jackson would be feeling in this moment and how to capture that, because as I said earlier, I felt most of what Jackson is feeling in this scene. So this is exactly what I said to him, and it's actually a clip from the audio that we got from that shooting day right before that take. Here it is. Check it out.
Cool. Let's just get one more. Really take your time with this one, because you went about the same speed at first, and then you slowed down at the mom part. I'd try and take your time throughout all of it, because this is a hard thing for you to talk about. And you've never been able to trust anyone before. And even though it is your reflection, just verbalizing them is difficult. So kind of just tap into that and really take your time. Let the audience feel the emotion. Feel that pain, that struggle that you're feeling just to even say. And they don't even know what you're saying, but you do. And make them feel that.
And man, DK absolutely crushed it after I said that, which you see in the final product. He just added every layer of depth and emotion and character that he could to Jackson, and it shines through the screen. I have to once again just give mad props to DK for being the best person to portray this character. I literally cannot think of a single person that could play that character better than he did. He just crushed it, and I have to commend him for that. He's just so talented and just gave everything that he could to this performance, and I'm so incredibly thankful for that. Anyways, we finished the day. I went home and checked my footage, and it was exactly what I needed, much to my delight. However, I ran into some trouble on the way to get this sucker done, and it was really freaking stressful. So, editing, let's pick up right where we left off. I check my footage, it's perfect, then I go to import it all, and my computer will not let me import my footage straight through Final Cut Pro, which is the editing software I use. It's not appearing at all under any of the import options. I started to get a little worried, but then I remembered that I knew a few back-end ways to get this footage from my phone to my computer, so I dropped the stress. However, with every method I tried, I ran into one of two problems. It was either not the right file type and thus not compatible with Final Cut Pro for some reason, or it was extremely low quality, and I had filmed the thing in 4K, which is some of the highest quality possible, and I was not about to settle for crappy quality. Now at this point, I'm getting extremely nervous. All the methods that I knew to get the footage to my computer were failing, so I went to Apple support, and thankfully they were able to help get my footage to my computer. They also gave me some things to do once the call was over, so I didn't have to use that back-end method every time I wanted to import footage, and it would simply work through Final Cut Pro like I was supposed to. Basically, I had to back up my computer so I wouldn't lose anything, and then upgrade my computer to a new type of operating system so that I would be able to use Final Cut Pro the way that I needed to. However, seeing how my computer was 8 years old, the software capabilities had reached its end, it was maxed out, and so when I tried to update it, the computer basically gave way and just couldn't function correctly, or at all. Long story short, I got a new computer and I was able to get the footage onto it with no problem and just restored my backup of my computer onto my new computer, so nothing I had on my computer went anywhere. I had everything I needed. I was finally able to get to editing, which for any other project would be the longest process or the longest part of filmmaking. But for this short film, it was actually super easy. The bulk of editing a standard dramatic short film is editing together your shots. Normally, you have a pretty large variation of shots that you tinker around with, and you just see what works, what supports your story the most. But with a one-shot short film, there's not a whole lot of that to be done. My main editing stuff came with the stuff at the very beginning with the title, the lighting effects of the visuals, and the credits. So with the title reveal and what you hear at the beginning with the just start whenever you're ready, that actually took a while to get the right sound that I had in mind. I had to play around with a lot of fades, with a lot of different sound effects I was able to find on the internet and just a stock footage on Final Cut Pro. I had to put this echo on my voice to kind of give this feeling of openness and emptiness. It also helped keep the voice pretty mysterious. I didn't want to give away with his voice at the beginning that he was talking to himself, but I didn't want it to feel incredibly different right out of the gate. I put the swirliness on my voice and then immediately cut it to him and the silence of the situation. It helped us exist in his head for a moment where everything is dark and empty and loud and getting louder and louder, and then we are pulled into reality, which is pretty dark and empty but quiet. And it was a really nice contrast that that cut was able to pull off. The extent of the visual editing was pretty limited. I just darkened some of the things in the background and lightened the stuff that was in the foreground of the shot, so the stuff that was supposed to be the center of the attention stayed the center of attention, and then the things that didn't matter stayed out of the spotlight. I did also add some slight coloring effects, such as saturation and warmth, but just enough to help make things pop a little more and feel a little bit more natural. I did try a couple more extreme color effects, but nothing really worked. I also tried black and white, but that didn't do much to support the short film either. It wasn't bad. It actually looked pretty decent, but it just didn't support it. Like I said earlier, everything that you see, you hear, everything that happens in a short film needs a reason for being there. And if you can't explain why it's there, then it shouldn't be there. So I stuck with what I had, and overall I was really satisfied with it. The other thing that took up the most time was the credits. Just typing it out, ordering it the way that I wanted to, and timing it with the music. And the music that you hear during the credits is actually original music. I played that on my keyboard at home and just put it onto my short film. If it sounds familiar to you, it is loosely based off of an emotional motif from the score of Avengers Infinity War, a film that I really, really love. Particularly the scene when Thanos is on Vormir and he sacrifices Gamora in order to get the Soul Stone. It's not a complete ripoff, but the inspiration is there. My mind was just really on Marvel at the time, and I thought that music actually really fit. And I chose just the piano because I thought it helped really support the isolation and the emptiness of what Jackson is feeling. The solo piano on mostly simple chords helped carry this atmosphere of loneliness, which is what this short film is all about. It just fit perfectly. It didn't take very long to play it out and to time the credits with the music, and I was on my way. And that's really it when it comes to editing. There's not much else here. Like I said, with any other short film, this would be a very tedious process, but with a one-shot short film, there is very little to actually edit. So once I finished everything, I was finally finished with my short film and was ready to get to work with what to do when it's finished. The final section before I wrap things up is distribution. There's not too much to talk about here. I plan to have Therapy released on April 27th, which was a Saturday, and I advertised that at a lot of different places on my YouTube channel, on my social media, but ultimately I found that waiting was just not going to be possible. I had finished it way before I thought I'd have it done, so I just could not hold it back anymore, so I decided to upload it 2 weeks early, and it got a really great reception from my friends and my family, and I'm extremely humbled that my own personal experiences were able to have an impact on the people watching. It was so reassuring and just validated the things that I've gone through in my life, and that there was a reason why those things happened. With the short film competition that I wanted to submit it to, turns out it was actually pretty terrible. I was not actually able to go to the screening for the competition. I had work, but my dad was able to be my representative, and he told me that they basically just had some people come for the screening, and anybody could just show up and come to the screening, and they just showed all the submissions, and then everybody in the room just voted for their favorites, and supposedly the ones picked for the top 3 each had like 5 or 6 people there kind of supporting that short film, so they obviously just had the majority of the votes just because they had the most people there. So that was pretty terrible, and he said it was such a miserable experience because nobody else really made that great of videos. So that was nice. However, I do plan to submit this in some short film festivals and competitions locally, and just seeing if I can't get some recognition for this bad boy. It's a long shot, but it's a dream, and it would be a huge step forward for me if I was able to get recognized for something that I love. Other than that, that's really all there is for distribution. It's pretty simple stuff. Alright, so that is it. That's my full breakdown of Therapy and everything it has to offer. If you listen to this whole thing, first off, thank you. Secondly, go outside, get some fresh air, maybe go for a walk. You definitely need it. I definitely need it. And who doesn't want to explore the beautiful outdoors? Anyways, I hope this helped give you some perspective into what actually goes into a short film. Most people just watch the 8 to 10 minute short film, comment on it, and move on, but never stop to think about how much planning, work, dedication, investment actually goes into making a short film, let alone a full-length film for that matter. So hopefully this helped you appreciate the art of filmmaking a little bit more than you did before. So this is where I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks again for listening. If you want me to do this with every short film I do in the future, just let me know. I really liked doing this. It was a great way of just articulating a lot of things that I've been thinking about throughout this process, without annoying people. So my next short film is in the works now. I can't give away any details on it. I have no clue when it's coming, but I am so excited with what I'm working on, and I just can't wait to share it with you guys whenever it's ready. So thank you guys again so much for listening. Go subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Jake Hageman. Watch some of my ridiculous videos. Watch some of my good videos. Go follow me on social media, and all of those will be in the description below. That's it. I'm signing off. I'll catch you later.
All right, now let's edit this joker.